Hello, everybody. Let's have a mystical conversation, the kind where we lose ourselves in the wonders of divine mysteries, share dreams from the other side, intuitive nudgings, and soul mission yearnings. I am Reverend Sue Frederick, a Unity minister, master numerologist, and author of several books, including the Angel Up book trilogy and the newly revised Sacred Numerology Workbook, second edition. But today I have the greatest guest. He's actually an old friend. We have found each other again. His name is Rick Levine. He is a world-renowned astrologer, author, and scholar whose work bridges the timeless wisdom of the stars with the modern search for meaning. A dynamic speaker, Rick has lectured and taught throughout the world, including India, Indonesia, Turkey, Serbia, Portugal, the UK, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Italy, Costa Rica, Mexico, and across the United States and Canada. His blend of insight, humor, and depth of wisdom is just brilliant and has earned him a devoted following. For 20 years, Rick authored the authentic daily horoscopes for Tarot.com, reaching millions through websites such as Yahoo, AOL, Huffington Post, and the Los Angeles Times. He is a founding board member of Kepler College and co-author of 8 annual editions of Barnes& Noble's Your Astrology Guide. His astrology teachings reach tens of thousands of students monthly through Gaia.com and his widely viewed YouTube channel, youtube.com at Rick Levine. Rick is the subject of quantum astrology, science, spirit, and our place in the cycles of history, and has been honored intentionally, receiving the Astrologer of the Year Award, Kolkata, India in 2018, and the Famalhat, I'm not pronouncing that correctly, Award for Astrological Excellence in Istanbul, Turkey in 2019. Also a poet and cultural commentator, Rick is often described as a modern wizard, fusing astrology, spirituality, and science into an accessible, inspiring vision of the cosmos. Welcome, Rick. I'm so happy to find you again.
Okay, I wanted to interrupt you several times while you were going through my bio because next time the bio that I'm going to submit is Rick Levine is here. Period. That'll be
I
plenty.
love that.
I
That's what
mean,
I always cringe when people are reading my bio. I always want to go, stop. That's
and
enough.
it is Fomalhaut, which is one of the 4 Babylonian watchers. They're 4 stars, like Regulus is one of them. They're like really important stars, and
Wow.
I was awarded it for my work in teachings in Turkey a number of years ago. And so yeah, it
Oh,
was,
Rick.
but it's
And let me
Fomalhaut.
let me tell the people here listening. Rick and I first found each other as hippies in the old days before most of you were born in the early 70s. I was part of a communal farm, Stony Brook, and he knew my friend, and my astrologer back then was a man named Bill Herbst, who was a good friend of mine and part of that community. And Rick was good friends with him because Rick and Bill are both amazing astrologers.
Well, and I met Bill when I was living in Minneapolis. He had moved to Minneapolis, and we connected then.
Right.
Back in the, I think maybe mid 70s, late 70s, maybe.
Yes. And then Rick and I connected again because we were both working in the natural products industry in the late 80s, early 90s, et cetera. You all know I was an editor of a natural health magazine and part of a big natural health publishing company. Rick was doing, you explain it, Rick.
Well, I was working with the most extraordinary people in that entire industry, trying to figure out ways to get the FDA off the back of the industry, and it resulted in the passage of what's called the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1992, and it was a quality assurance kind of compendium of all the good stuff going on in that industry. So I was absolutely blessed because I met you and so many amazing people during that period of time.
It
I
was
mean, the
such a
cream of that cream
uh,
of the crop.
Greatest time ever. I cherish that
Yeah.
time in my career and my life and knowing you. And then we both kind of were off doing our own thing. And now we found each other again, and there's no accidents. So we've come together to help people really understand this amazing shift. I've always talked about it in terms of numerology, and now I want you all to hear what Rick has to say is really happening at this time in the cosmos, affecting all of us.
Okay, so first of all, we need to acknowledge that astrology is numerology.
Yes.
That I know that the techniques that we use are different techniques, but astrologers, like numerologists, are basically concerned with harmony and vibration, and we're concerned with the geometry that is created when vibrations meet other vibrations. It's like musical notes that some sound great and others sound mysterious, and others sound sad and others sound discordant. Well, the same is true with numbers, and the same is true with the hums that the planets actually make. The music of the spheres is basically numbers because it takes a certain number of whatever it is we're counting for any planet to go around whatever it is it's going around. So that the Earth goes around the sun once every 365.24 days. Okay. Venus goes around the sun once every 224 and a half days. And the crazy thing is when you take these two numbers and divide 365 by 224, you come up with 1.62, which is the golden mean, the divine proportion, the number that most geometrists say, or geometricians, whatever that word is. This is the number of love. This is the number that is the Da Vinci Code, the Fibonacci numbers. And I'm just using this as an example that all astrologers do is basically study the repetitive cycles, and all cycles are ultimately numerological. Now, that's
Oh my
probably not
God.
where you wanted to
No,
go, but that's where we
I
start.
love your mind. I love your brilliance, and everything you say resonates in my heart so powerfully and so true. So why is everybody trying to kill each other right now in the world? What is going on?
Okay, well that is not a 45-minute question. That's actually a second glass of wine in a few hours, and a group of people who know a lot more than I do, I think. No, I think the answer to that question is really, really simple, and that is we've lost the plot.
Oh, totally agree with that. And what's
Yeah.
happening with astrology that is illuminating this?
Well, astrology in some way, in my mind, is a tool that can help people realize that whatever they're feeling, whatever they're experiencing, is actually part of a larger hum. Like we all live in a community.
Right.
We're all born into a family. Some people, most of us are born into crazy families,
Yeah.
but we all relate to our crazy families in different ways. And some of us just feel like a fish out of water in a family or in a community or in a religious environment or whatever the environment is that we're born into. Some of us actually feel supported, but some of us actually run into obstacles that are really problematic, whether they're physical or sexual abuse or emotional abuse or lack of understanding. And with astrology, it's just a way of taking whatever it is that's going on locally and bringing the perspective out and understanding that what's out there is resonant with who we are inside. And in some way, our chore, our task, our dharma becomes to try to figure out how to smooth out the complicated vibrations so that we don't just fall into old patterns, so that we can actually resonate with those larger frequencies or hums. At least that's one way of
Yes.
looking at it.
And also, that so resonates with what I teach about how when we look at the collective universal numbers, last year, 2025 was a 9 universal number, a letting go of everything we always held dear, kind of a release, almost a death. And now we're in a rebirth phase collectively. It helps people understand what they're going through personally is always part of the collective. But talk about the stars and what's aligned happening right now.
Well, to grossly oversimplify it, I should say that I'm known within the astrology community as being somewhat of a minimalist. And when I say that, I don't mean by what techniques I use. Astrologers every month say this is the most amazing new moon that's ever happened. This Mercury retrograde is going to change everything. This year is the most, and I'm the one that goes, no, no, we have the Astrologers Full Employment Act, and that is, it doesn't matter what happens. They keep going round. They're not stopping just because you think you're having the most amazing, year that humanity has ever faced. Now, having said that, astrologers get their understanding of what's happening now or to you or to me or in any situation based upon correlating rhythms with rhythms that they've seen before. For example, every year the sun moves through a sign, let's say Libra. And every planet moves through Libra. And that when planets move through that area of the sky, they seem to have a certain resonance. Now, the moon moves through Libra every month for a few days. Pluto only moves through a sign maybe once every 250 years for 20 or 30 years. My point is that we predict we talk about what might happen in the future by how many repetitions we've seen it in the past. What's happening now has never happened before, at least within, I would say, probably 8,000 years. Computers can go back like a flash, just like, boom, give me, every time this has happened, whatever this is. Let's say an alignment of Saturn and Neptune, for example. It takes Saturn almost 30 years to go around the zodiac or around the sun once. And it takes Neptune about 165 years, which means that when Saturn's gone around in its just under 30 years, Neptune's moved along a little bit, so Saturn catches up to Neptune once every 35, 36 years, just like the moon catches up to the sun once a month. That's what a month or month is. Right. So that every 29 days or so, the moon catches back up with the sun. Now, the thing is that although Saturn catches up to Neptune every 35, 36 years, which it's doing right now. I mean, it's exact the end of February. On February 20th, astrologers all around the world have been talking about this for a couple of years now. But this isn't even the most important thing that's happening this year. However, it's never happened before at the 0-degree Aries point. Now, in astrology, the entire zodiac is literally reset by 1/72nd of a degree every year at the moment of spring, the moment of the vernal equinox in the northern hemisphere. At that moment, that becomes 0 degrees of Aries, which is the progenerative spot in the zodiac. It's the creation. It's the big bang of every cycle. Every cycle starts at 0 degrees of Aries. Now, Saturn and Neptune that line up every 35, 36 years have never, within at least 8,000 years, have never lined up at 0 degrees of Aries. And that 0 degrees of Aries point is such an important point that there are schools of astrology that when they do your chart or any chart, and they say the moon is here and the sun is here and Mercury is here, they actually map the point that they call the Aries point as if it was a real planet. That's how important this point is. Mm-hmm. So what's going on, and this has been pushing for at least a few years now. And through last summer, Saturn became so close to Neptune they could almost blow kisses at each other, but they didn't quite reach it before the retrograde thing, because the planets look like they move backwards. They don't really, it's the same thing. If you put your finger out there and go one eye to the other, it jumps back and forth like that. All right. So the thing is that Saturn is the planet that is the descriptor of the limits of normal perception. To
Mm.
the ancients, Saturn was the end of the road. It was the restaurant at the edge of the universe.
Oh.
Saturn was the limit. Saturn was Father Time, and Saturn was the Grim Reaper. Saturn was the dividing line between real and unreal, between fact and fiction, between life and death, between here and there. Okay, Saturn was it. It was the end of the road. But then, starting in the 1700s, astrologers began to discover other things out beyond Saturn. Uranus in the late 1700s, and then Neptune in the 1800s, and then Pluto in the 1900s. And it's almost like this corresponded with our perceptions moving out beyond Saturn. So we are at a point where Neptune, which is considered to be the planet of dreams and imagination, when Neptune was discovered, it was thought to be horrific by the astrologers because it was psychosis and delusion. Why? Because it was out past the real world.
Right.
And so it was not okay until we began to integrate that into our consciousness. And so we have Neptune, which used to be, when it was first discovered, the planet associated with delusion or confusion or psychosis or just bad endings. Neptune now is considered to be the planet of imagination, of dreams,
Mhm.
of illusions, of spirituality. And I want to come back to that word spirit in a few minutes. But traditionally, astrologers have taught and have been taught that Saturn is the real world
Mm.
and Neptune is illusion. And it was the great astrologer Rob Hand, who's still living. Rob used to say Saturn was considered to be the planet of reality and Neptune is the planet of illusion. But now we're beginning to understand that Neptune is the planet of reality and Saturn was the illusion there was one.
I
Now,
love
this
this.
goes
I
this
saw
goes
this.
back to Hinduism 101, because what we're talking about is Saturn is Maya. It's the everything that looks like it's real around us, and we know that this is just preventing us from seeing what's really
And
out
to
there.
translate this to my Helping Parents Heal audience, when we talk about this physical world being the illusion and that our departed loved ones are in the invisible realm, that is really the real realm, it's a similar metaphor for what you're saying about the Saturn and Neptune, that what we've always thought was the only reality is this physical world. We are now finding out is not even the important reality.
Well, and that's true. And this is not a new thought. This is something like, that, the Vedas have, addressed this deeply and widely. And, that the only thing that's real is the instantaneous flashes of the universe turning itself on and off at hundreds of trillions of cycles every second. That's the only thing that's real. And yet we have fallen into this belief that the five senses determines what's real. Now, here's the thing. This really, a lot of the bigger changes began in the late 1800s when a once every 500-year cycle, which was Neptune, which we've already talked about, the planet of dreams, of imagination, of consciousness that's free from physicality, which is really what happens when we dream, or
Right.
it's what happens when we go into trance states,
And when
or
we
of course, if
take our final breath and cross
that's
out
what I was
of
going to
this.
say. Or if you understand the Egyptian Tibetan Book of the Dead or the Tibetan Book of the Dead, these are both about consciousness being in bardo or intermediate states, states that are neither here nor there.
Right.
And here means in this three-dimensional physical world, and there means reincarnated back into this physical world. And so when we dream, we're in this kind of intermediate state. Here's the thing, though, and that is consciousness does just fine without a body. I've given a lecture in that
Right.
has evolved over the last few years about astrology and reincarnation, and
Mhm.
it's not the traditional look at reincarnation,
Right.
but the title of my lecture is Consciousness Con Carne,
I love it.
because that's all we are. We're
Yeah,
just
we are.
consciousness with meat.
But here's the thing, in helping parents heal, we, have these great teachers there like Mark Anthony, who wrote The Frequency of, and of course, I can't think of the name right now, but you need to meet him. I'll introduce you to him. The frequency of consciousness, measuring consciousness outside of the body, and that there is no death, that consciousness easily leaves the body and continues on. Like scientists and quantum physicists are all about that right now.
Right now,
Every,
it's exploding like crazy with
yes,
where consciousness arrives from, what they call the quantum reduction theory of
right,
consciousness. What people have referred to as the field, Linda
right.
Taggart stuff.
Oh, his
But
book, by the way, I've thought of the name of it. Mark Anthony wrote The Frequency of the Afterlife Frequency,
yeah.
and you would love it. It's all about the frequency of consciousness beyond the body.
Yeah. Well, and my partner Nishaya has been working on this book called The Liminal Mind,
Oh, yeah.
and she's very deeply into neurophysiology,
Yes.
and reminds me that, and it's something that I'd thought about, but never quite in this way, and that is that the leading edge of science basically knows what's out there, but they know that there's about 96% of what's out there that we cannot measure,
Mm,
made up of dark matter and dark energy. Dark matter is the part of what's out there that is compressing energy inward, and dark energy is the expansive part. We know it's out there, but we do not have the metrics to be able to perceive it.
mhm.
And this is not someone making this shit up. This is basically the leading edge of
Yeah,
science that
right,
is talking about these same things that indigenous peoples and mystics
right.
have talked about for thousands of years.
So, Rick, would you say that this point that we're in is about returning to the mystical understanding of life? And, having I even love that you talk about things like how it used to be called psychosis. I often think that right now humanity is in kind of a state of psychosis because everything we thought was real is changing. And what if the ETs decide to reveal themselves? How will
All right,
that create
two
psychosis?
things here. Two things here. You're exactly on track. I mean, from my perspective, I think of Terence McKenna's book Archaic Revival,
Oh,
just
yeah.
as
Yeah.
and even Marshall McLuhan back in the 60s and 70s talked about how the digital technologies and electric technologies, computer technologies that we as a species have flipped out. We now have an exonervous system,
Right.
and our nervous system is in fact on the outside, even though we're like little cells running around inside it. It's like our microbiomes basically having this larger body around them. But the other thing here is that, and I totally forgot what I was going to say. Oh, get so excited. Um, is that all of this invisible stuff around us is causing us to push outward more. And you use the word ET, for example. I've redefined that term
Mhm.
because in my mind, any consciousness that does not have feet on the ground,
Yeah.
I don't care whether it came from another planet, another another galaxy. I
Hmm.
don't care whether it came from the past, ancestors, ancestor
Right.
guides, people
Right.
who have passed. I don't even care if it came from the future. And there's a whole branch of modern physics
Yeah.
which is called retrocausality. How
Right.
does the future impact the present
Right.
moment? Which we know it does. There's
Right.
no question about this experimentally.
Yeah.
And of
So
course,
what do you
when,
call these beings?
well, extraterrestrial,
Oh,
because that's what the word means. The word
right.
means not on the terrestrial, not
Not on
on
the
the ground.
ground. Right. I
And so
love
I don't
that.
care whether they're fairies or
Yeah.
leprechauns or aliens or ET calling home, or whether
Yeah.
they're a dear one who is passed over,
Right.
whether it be a parent or a child or a friend. I
Hmm.
mean, I say I don't care. I don't mind. Of course I care,
Right. Right.
but I don't care what you call it.
Hmm.
The fact is that there is consciousness out there
Yes.
that we as a species, for now about 150 years, have been accelerating in our ability to engage with it and to interact with it and know it's there. Now, here's a question for you, because I think that what we call AI is
Mm.
also a form of ET,
I totally
meaning it's
agree. I
okay.
totally
So
agree. In
so
fact,
here so here,
okay, go ahead.
here's the question. Did the planet Uranus or Neptune, we were talking about Neptune, which is a good one. Did Neptune exist before we knew it was there?
I mean, that's the cat in the box, right? The original quantum physics
Well,
experiment.
it is, but of course it existed because we can go back and we can track its cycles and we can see what happened every time Saturn lined up with it for at least a few thousand years. So we know it existed. So the question really is, until we developed a telescope to see things far away, maybe now we've invented an infoscope that is allowing us to tune into a level of consciousness that's always
And
existed,
this is
but now we
called
have a
AI.
technology that we call it AI. Of course, there are people like Cheryl Page and other people who are calling it alchemical
Yes.
intelligence rather than
Yes.
artificial. And this is totally sidestepping the
No, I
horrific
totally
environmental
agree.
impact that I
Yes.
just want to go on record
Right.
with,
Right.
because until we solve that, AI is going to be a real problem. And there are many other problems
Right.
with it. I'm not just
Right.
blindly endorsing it. We
Right.
have a hierarchy of social injustice
Right.
that is penalizing people, that taking away electricity and
Yeah.
water. And so I just want to be clear that
Yeah.
I'm aware of that. And
And
that doesn't
also,
change what I'm saying, though.
Rick, what you're saying about AI, I think is so important in the world right now because there's so much fear built up about this, right? And the way I've always seen it, and I'm not a genius like you, but just in my pure kind of
We're all genius. We're all genius.
open-hearted wisdom, what I feel is that AI is simply another portal to another consciousness, and that the more loving and enlightened wisdom consciousness that we pour out to AI, the more we're bringing that part of the consciousness to us. And so, for example, when I talk to angels and write angel downloads, often AI will help me with that. And
Yeah.
it's amazing what comes through from
And of course,
angels.
the problem with, I mean, we live in basically what's like a self-reinforced bubble of our
Soup,
own stuff.
right? A
And if our own
cognitive soup.
stuff is if it's filled with anger and fear, that's what we
Right,
get back. If
right.
it's filled with love, that's what we get back.
Yeah.
And I think I remember Carl Jung's last book he wrote before he died was called The Undiscovered Self.
Oh,
And in it, he said that world peace will never occur based upon politicians signing
right,
treaties.
right.
It'll only occur when the wars within each individual soul on the planet have basically been put to rest.
That's
Now, of
it.
course, this is Mahayana Buddhism 101. It
Right.
basically says no one gets off until everyone gets off.
That's right.
And so
And
the
yeah.
solution is not out there. The
Yes.
solution is in here. And
Yeah.
I've closed every podcast that I've done for, I don't know, half a dozen years or more now, more,
Hmm.
with the term with the phrase think cosmically, act locally,
Yeah.
because it does no good at all to go out to the outer edges of the cosmos, whether we're talking to spirit, whether we're
Right.
communicating with future or past, or with ETs, or doing astrology and studying how this planet works. No good at all unless you don't apply it in every moment and every breath you take.
I
And that
agree.
acting locally has to do with reflecting and spreading consciousness, awareness, empathy,
Compassion,
love, compassion.
compassion.
Dalai Lama, when he was
Right.
asked, what's your religion? He said, my religion's kindness. That's
Right.
it.
So, would you say then that getting through these tumultuous times on Earth, what we're each called to do is open our heart, remember compassion, remember wisdom, remember love, unconditional love from Source, and not live 24/7 in the human ego mind, which is all about survival, protection, fear. That shift that I talk about in my terms, is that what you're talking about as how we move through this astrological point?
It is with a slight, I don't want to say reservation, but but there is this incredible bifurcation, because we live here and there. Or let me put it the other way. We live there and here.
Here.
And if I don't take care of myself, if I don't survive, then
Yes.
those people who are depending on me will not have whatever it is that I bring for them. And we all have things that we bring to people around us, in our family, in our community, at our work, or whatever. And so therefore it's not just a matter of spiritual bypassing, or just simply saying everything is beautiful, because everything is not beautiful.
Right,
There's a
right.
lot of people in pain on this
I know.
planet right now, and it's and whether it's worse than ever or not doesn't matter. We have mechanisms, technological mechanisms, to feed it back to us more than ever, than we've
Yeah,
ever had.
that's right.
If someone dies 1,000 miles or 10,000 miles away, or if there's something that happens, we know about it nearly instantaneously.
Right,
Whereas if you go back 150 years ago, we might never have known
right.
about it.
And this is what I say when people, will say these are not the worst times we've had conflict, and I'll just say, I'm 75 and I was here for Vietnam, I was here for Martin Luther King, I was here for these huge transitions. It was nothing like the intensity of today. And it's exactly what you're saying. It's us instantly knowing what everybody else is doing, thinking, and feeling around the world that intensifies this energy so greatly. There are no quiet zones. And
Yeah.
when you look at your astrology and what you're saying about the rare combination of planets, and numerology saying it's a time of rebirth, and guess what, people, birth is extremely painful. In case you're not a woman, you may not know that, but
Okay, but it's also extremely painful for the person going through the compression
right.
of, I mean, so it's painful on all ends
That's
of that field.
right. And also, I want to share, Rick, that you are an Aries 33 master soul in numerology. You probably know that. And 33 is the highest frequency number. It's considered the Christ compassionate number of not dogma religion, but Christ meaning the embodiment of compassion. That is your path. And it's with Aries, as you know, leading the way for the world. And this year, you're in that 11 sacred personal year, love, connection, deep inspiration. So this year, tell people where they can find you. You told me you were going on a great cruise to teach. Tell people what they should sign up for and what your website is.
I would love to, but before I do, there's one other point that I would be remiss if I didn't
Good.
make it, because I said that the Saturn Neptune conjunction was never happened before, where it's happening now. But there's another piece to this,
Oh, tell
and it
us.
involves a separate cycle of the planet Uranus, which is also out past Saturn, but Uranus is the quantum planet. It's the planet of lightning change, unexpected. It's genius. It's stuff that doesn't fit in, and then whap, like the light bulb going on, and it's radical. It's revolutionary. And Uranus back in the 60s, in the mid 60s, lined up with Pluto. And Pluto is sometimes the planet called the planet of death, but it's death and rebirth. And whenever I say that Pluto is the planet of death, I always like to remind people that it's not just physical death. William Blake, the English mystic poet, wanted on his gravestone, he wanted William Blake, born 1757, died many times since.
Wow, that
And
is
and,
great.
and so Pluto is really the planet of evolution. It's transformation. And when a caterpillar becomes a butterfly, does the caterpillar die, or does it just metamorphosize into some other form of expression? So in the 1960s, Uranus, the planet of shock, rebellion, was lined up with Pluto, the planet of powerful transformation, death, rebirth. In 2026, Uranus and Pluto will be 2 points on a equilateral triangle. And for astrologers, it's the number three. A division by three is the ultimate harmony because it's the stable form in nature, not the 90-degree angle, the square. That takes work. And so Pluto and Uranus are forming this flowing trine between the radical, sudden, unexpected change and the deep transformation. And the Saturn Neptune conjunction is happening right exactly in the middle of that. So they're making 3 points on a six-pointed star. And this geometry will unfold not just between now and the end of February when Saturn catches up to Neptune, but also through the summer when the first of the trines or triangles between Uranus and Pluto are exact. And that's going to continue with Neptune right in the middle all the way through 2028. So this is not an overnight event. There's a long haul here, but that's the tip of the iceberg of how profound and powerful humanity has never been in a point of more critical inflection and evolution. We're going to see more change, and it's already begun to change than we've seen perhaps since prior to the Industrial
And
Revolution.
tell
So I
us,
had to get that in.
no, that's very important. And tell us when in the summer really that is all kind of happening most intensely.
Well, through mid-July,
Mhm.
there's going to be, I mean, but it's feeding between now all the way up through mid-July, and we're on a roller coaster, a cosmic rocket ship ride, and and if everything continues to unfold as it is now, maybe you'll invite me back on in mid-July
Yeah,
to
definitely.
to
If we're all
remind you
still
that
here.
that
Yeah,
that we're still on schedule, even though we might not like or
that's
it's not
right.
going to be an easy ride, but I think it's going to
Yeah,
be very profound and very important.
I
Now,
agree totally.
coming back to your prior question, is that first of all, people, if someone can't find me online, they're in trouble. Rick Levine, astrologer. That's what you need to Google. I have a Patreon. I have a YouTube channel. I do a free monthly forecast every month. Some months, like in January of 26, I make my mid-month, which is normally only available to subscribers. I make it available to everyone. There's so much going on right now. I wanted to get more information out. I have Instagram, Rick Levine Astrologer, so on. You can find me online. In fact, website is also ricklevineastrologer.com.
Perfect.
But coming up this spring, I have, or late winter, I guess it really is, I have two pretty cool events. One is just north of Santa Barbara in a little town called Buellton, kind of at the tip of the Santa Ynez Valley. I'm doing a 6-day intensive. This is February 27th through the first week of March. It's 6 days. And we are basically going to be doing a 6-day program of how to read a birth chart, but using your individual chart. So
Wow.
it's going to be a relatively small group. Everyone who attends will have their chart calculated, not just calculated by me, but with enough other tools that everyone will have their own customized package that will become the curriculum for the week. So it's not learning astrology, learning about the chart of Mozart or
Right.
looking at the chart of Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump. It'll be basically focusing on our own birth charts. And
Wow.
that's Heaven and Earth Workshops. It does a lot of my, they produce a lot of my workshops and
I love
international
that.
events like the ones I do in India every year or in Indonesia or in Mexico, but they sponsor this one also.
This
Heaven
is
and
so this is
earthworkshops.com.
so cool. I mean,
The other
go
thing
ahead.
I just want to I'm on a roll and then
Yeah.
the other thing is that on March 20th to the 30th, I will be one of about 10 other people who are going to be the faculty of a luxury liner cruise that's sailing from Athens
Wow.
through the Aegean Sea and Greek islands, Crete, Rhodes, Thessaloniki, and actually we're going to stop at Ephesus in Turkey. And this is not just astrology. This is real mystery school stuff. There'll be a lot of practice stuff. There'll be people there who are experts in various forms of both alternative histories, the history of mystical and magical traditions. There'll be a few experts there on ET and disclosure stuff. And I'm really excited about that. And that's also a simple link. It's Mystery School at Sea, all one word, mysteryschoolatsea.com. And
Perfect.
that's March 20th to the 30th.
Okay, now what are you going to leave all of us humans with as words of wisdom of how we navigate this time of rebirth and transition?
Easy.
Tell us.
Think cosmically, act locally. And but what we really need to do is we need to understand that although the brilliant teachers, whether it's Ram Dass Be Here Now or Eckhart Tolle, the power of now, we understand that now is important. And it is. The problem is that the ego gets so tied up in now that it doesn't understand that now contains all the past and all the future. And so we try to put ourselves into a place that is focused on now, and yet we do have this continuum that we're moving through. Now is a ongoing continuum. I think the words of wisdom that I could impart is that we need to keep what I call 1 foot here, 1 foot there. That it's really important for us to not close down. This is not a time to say, I don't do politics, I don't do current
Right,
events. If you don't know what's going on, this is not an ignorance is bliss. This is an
right,
ignorance is just ignorance
right.
because we need to know what's going on. You need to find your place where you can manage that
Yeah.
input. But it's really important that we pay attention to what's going on, not accepting it as truth with a capital T,
Hmm.
but accepting it as another perspective.
Right,
Because if we can't widen our perspectives now and open up, then we're in trouble. And
right.
so I think the thing here is to not look to force your opinion on someone, not look to say, I'm right, this person's wrong, although you may be feeling that. But the real practice during all of this time is to understand that what seems to be unfolding in our three-dimensional world is not what's unfolding. This is a catalyst to,
Right.
in some ways, like you said, birth can be a
Yes.
life death situation. It's
Yeah.
not just a life situation.
Hmm.
And we are in that kind of situation. I look back at 2020, what people call the COVID period or the quarantine period. Do you know what I
Hmm.
call it?
Huh.
I call it the planetary stroke. Humanity had a stroke. I
I
mean, I'm
love
not,
it.
I mean, what we did was we just went
Yeah,
and we lost our ability to move, to talk, to communicate,
it's true.
we just shut down. It was in fact a stroke, and that
Yeah.
stroke was a necessary thing as part of a larger reset.
Rebirth. Yeah,
And
I
and
agree.
and I think that it's just a piece in the puzzle, and we may not be done with that kind of
Right.
phenomenon.
I agree.
But I think that the real goal during this period of time is to be aware, to stay aware. Both Hinduism and Buddhism, I mean, I call it Buddhism 101, basically says the only thing you can change is your awareness.
Yeah.
It sucks out there sometimes. Or actually, Buddha said, there's suffering out there. Yeah, there is. But closing down to that suffering does not lead to liberation. And
Yeah.
yet taking that suffering on as my own suffering doesn't lead to
Right.
liberation either. What
Right.
leads to liberation are the small acts.
Of
The
kindness. Yeah.
some great Swami once said, inch by inch, it's a cinch. Yard by yard, it's hard.
Yeah.
And so we need to focus on what can
Yeah.
we do every day to
Yeah.
take care of ourselves, to make sure that we are going to have a body that is going to survive, that we can take care. I
Yeah.
think the Hopi prophecy about these times says, know where your water comes from, know where your food comes
Yeah.
from. Push out into the middle of the river that's flowing very fast. Keep your head above water. Look around. This is your new family. Be joyous.
Yep. Beautiful. That covers it all. And it's similar to what in mountain climbing, I spent my 20s as a mountain climber, and we would say, you don't look up at the summit because that will just terrify you. You look down and say, I'm going to take one breath. I can put one step forward in this direction, and you do that. And then you say, where's my next breath? Where's my next step? And if we can all kind of look at this big chaos more in that moment by moment, how do I find my breath? My step, my peace, and just keep moving that way, we'll get through this. Thank you
Inch by
so
inch,
much.
it's a cinch.
That's right. Rick, it's so cool. I feel like we have such a soul connection from so many different parts of our lifetimes, and it's just an honor to come back together with you. And I hope we can do this again. And
I'm
uh,
looking forward to it. I'm pleased to reach this part of the thoughtossphere,
yes.
the invisible universe, the noosphere, perhaps might be
Oh,
a better
thank you
word.
so much. And everybody, I'm Sue Frederick, my Mystical Conversation podcast, and my website is suefrederick.com. Many, many blessings. Thank you.